Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen, in for Josh Hinkle. This week, a closer look at the growing strain at the border. A spike in the number of migrants trying to cross puts agents under more pressure. Now there's a new plan to help handle the surge. And an up-and-coming Texas lawmaker takes the lead on a different approach to improving education, how he's winning support from both sides of the aisle. We begin by looking at how lessons from the deadly shootings at Santa Fe High School could lead to change at the Capitol. Leaders from the Santa Fe School District came to Austin to share their stories. Wes Rappaport shows us how they're shaping debate on a bill that lawmakers hope will better protect students in Texas.
A standing ovation for Santa Fe's district board president from lawmakers, acknowledging how the Southeast Texas community handled the deadly shooting on campus last year.
The community of Santa Fe is very strong. The students of Santa Fe ISD are very resilient.
Lawmakers heard hours of testimony on the Senate's proposal to strengthen school safety in Texas. The new bill requires districts to form a threat assessment team, come up with operations planning for emergencies, and consider increasing law enforcement presence.
If you're not safe, doesn't matter how well you're educated, and frankly, if you're not safe on your schools, it obviously doesn't matter.
Some districts have already made changes. Alpine ISD installed a clear backpack policy after a shooting there, and Rawls ISDs allowed certain staff members to be armed. Santa Fe ISD's board president says there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
What the community of Santa Fe needs, based on the fact that we had a tragedy, is different than the way a neighboring school district or no one may look at that.
The bill takes a two-pronged approach to funding, one-time investments like hardening of campuses and ongoing payments for things like violence prevention.
Failure in this is not an option. We owe it to our children, we owe it to future generations to create the safe environment for their educational experience.
I'm Wes Rappaport for State of Texas.
The district and even state leaders said Santa Fe went above and beyond when it came to school security before the shooting. Officers, cameras, a detailed crisis response plan, but it still happened. It highlights a complex issue, how to stop violence before it starts. Santa Fe leaders took those ideas to the South by Southwest Education Conference, but it's a discussion happening across Texas looking for ways to improve mental health.
A true hero who showed valor and saved many, many lives. Chief Forward, thank you very much.
At South by Southwest, the audience stood in applause for Santa Fe ISD's Assistant Police Chief Gary Forward, who that day pulled a wounded officer to safety before turning back towards the shooter.
Go back to engage with the gunman, try to keep him occupied, distracted, keep the focus on me, not on the kids.
Santa Fe had 18 full-time or part-time officers before the shooting and called themselves the poster child for community policing. Now they've added 20 more security personnel.
You can harden schools to the point to where they do look like a prison, trying to keep intruders out. But in most of these school shootings, the perpetrator was supposed to be there.
AISD patrol officer Wayne Sneed tells me while shootings grab attention, there are hundreds of trauma-filled days when it's just one student in crisis.
Typically when I get called in, it's pretty severe. It's either a suicide attempt or something that's really, really severe, like a student who has a severe plan.
Last year in AISD alone, 378 students tried to commit suicide. Nearly 1,700 injured themselves. Those numbers, he says, have been going up since he started in 2013.
I don't always know the answer to why. Sometimes the students can't even tell you why.
Officer Sneed testified a few days ago at a House hearing advocating for HB 10. It would create the Texas Behavioral Health Research Institute, a partnership with all of Texas's health-related universities to study prevention. Now, Officer Sneed is optimistic part of that bill will lead to research into the genetic cause of mental health problems, similar to what they've been doing to search for a cure for cancer and diabetes. Now, state lawmakers released a plan that promises to spend more state money to public schools while also cutting school property taxes. House members unveiled the $9 billion school finance reform bill at a Tuesday press conference. The plan increases the base per student funding provided by the state to schools. It also would lower tax rates in all school districts. The plan would also help cut the recapture payments from school districts under the Robin Hood plan.
This is school finance reform. This is what we have to do in the state of Texas. The courts have told us it is our responsibility to do this. The courts have said to us they are not going to touch this. And if we don't do this, we're failing our kids.
Governor Abbott seems to be on board with the House plan. He praised Huberty for taking a big step in honoring the pledge to Texans to address big issues like school finance.
Some lawmakers are taking a different approach when it comes to improving education and keeping students safe.
So this agenda is trying to kind of shift our education system toward teaching the whole student or the whole child.
How a freshman state representative is taking the lead on a plan to help students that goes beyond the classroom.
There's a lot of talk this session about improving education and making schools safer for students. But some lawmakers are looking beyond the basics, and one of the newest members is taking a leading role. We're joined by Representative James Tallarico. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're working on several bills all together. It's called the Whole Student Agenda.
Right.
What is that?
So it's a bipartisan legislative package and includes 24 bills currently that are hoping to promote safe and healthy schools through strengthening mental health services on campuses, scaling suicide prevention programs, and investing in practical curricula that's going to help prepare our students for the real world, like financial literacy, sex ed, and civics.
Civics, sex ed, mental health services. People will say this is important, but I'm sure you'll find some pushback who say that's not going to get that student a job. To those people you say?
Sure, I say you could just look at the work we've done this week. On Tuesday, we introduced, along with my other public education committee members, led by our chairman, Dan Huberty, HB 3, which is a comprehensive overhaul of our school finance system. And that includes things like early childhood funding for full-day pre-K for our students. It includes, career and education that moves all the way down to 6th grade. And so these are things that, are going to help prepare our students for the workforce. But again, if they're not healthy and safe, then the academics doesn't mean much to them.
How much time do you think that will some of this stuff take out of the day? Because you've been a teacher for years.
Sure.
Teachers tell me there isn't enough time to teach what they're required to do already. So.
Yeah, I would kind of flip that question and ask how much time in the day is currently being wasted because students are either off task or feeling like they're not ready to learn when they enter into the classroom.
And so which one of these will you be pushing as opposed to which one other ones have different authors?
Yeah, so some of them are written by me and we'll be working with joint authors to get those passed. And then others have been the primary authors or other legislators, which we've included in this agenda because they're kind of thematically similar. So Representative Theory, Dr. Allen, James White, it's a bipartisan coalition. So they've authored some of these pieces of legislation. Others are kind of led by our team.
So what's an example of one of those?
So for instance, one of our pieces of legislation that we're pushing as the primary author is an attempt to scale an initiative that's being used in Round Rock ISD to extend suicide prevention training to school officials outside of the classroom. And the primary example of that is bus drivers. Bus drivers are the school officials who see our kids first thing in the morning and last thing in the afternoon. And so they can really be our frontline defense in suicide prevention. They can do so much more than just drive a bus. They can really be some of the key folks pushing these really key initiatives.
And so that's training and...
Yep, that's training on suicide prevention, things to watch out for, how to react to a situation. And it's an initiative that's doing really great work in Round Rock ISD, and the goal of this bill is to scale that throughout the state.
This is your first legislative session.
Yeah.
This is, it's not very often a freshman takes on, to lead a 24 bill kind of agenda.
Sure.
What kind of encouragement have you got from the leadership in this?
Yeah, Speaker Bonin, who is obviously belongs to a different party than I do, has been tremendously encouraging to me. He came into the House also in his 20s at an early age, and took an active role in shaping policy and moving bills forward through the process. And he encouraged me to, as a freshman, both to kind of watch and learn, but also become an active participant in the process. I was elected to represent the people of House District 52, and they don't have time for me to wait and spend a session just sitting back and learning.
Yeah.
I have to both learn and participate at the same time.
And we're revamping a lot of school policies,
That's
school
right.
finance. Do you see this working kind of separate from HB3, or is this going to be worked into as a
I see
team
these
proposal?
as working hand in hand, as you know, HB3, which I was really honored to help shape from the ground up with the leadership of Vice Chair Diego Bernal, Chair Huberty, and Speaker Bonin, is really going to help fix our school finance system, offer relief to property taxpayers, and ensure that our curriculum is preparing students academically for high school and beyond. And then our agenda, I think, is meeting the other half of that, which is ensuring that our non-academic needs of our students are being met. And so hopefully the two can work together as a comprehensive approach to prepare our students for the future.
So you're going to do that, but then the Senate has different plans, it looks
Sure.
like, as of now. How do you see that playing out?
So, and as of our conversation, I haven't seen a school finance plan from the Senate. That may change by the time we're done here. But so currently, the only proposals I've seen from the Senate is a mandated teacher pay raise across the board, treating all teachers equally. So there are two problems with that. Of course, in politics, a quick soundbite is appealing to a lot of people and it's easy to communicate, and that's what's currently happening with SB3. But teachers don't work for the state legislature. They're not our employees to increase pay or not increase pay. They work for school districts. And so our proposal as the Texas House is to give the resources to districts to make those decisions for themselves on the ground. And if they want to have an across-the-board pay raise, that's up to them and their community. If they want to target that to the most experienced or the most talented teachers, that's up to them. But again, these decisions need to be made by local communities. I ran as a local control candidate, and I intend to legislate as a local control official.
Well, Representative Tallarico, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The system is well beyond capacity and remains at a breaking point.
Border Patrol faces a new surge of migrants seeking asylum. How a new facility in Texas could play a key role as the numbers increase.
The U.S. Border Patrol says its agents are at a breaking point amid a spike in the number of migrant families crossing the southern border. Anna Wernicke looks at how a new center being built in El Paso could help handle the surge.
The system is well beyond capacity and remains at a breaking point.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin McAleenan says the agency is overwhelmed.
More young children are arriving at our border, and we are seeing migrants arrive with illnesses and medical conditions in unprecedented numbers.
New statistics released Tuesday show that in February, Border Patrol had over 76,000 apprehensions, a 97% increase from this time last year.
Border Patrol Chief of Operations Brian Hastings says they expect this trend to increase, and agents aren't prepared.
We're devoting a large amount of our daily resources to this. The facilities and the manpower cannot support the continued increase in the apprehensions of family units.
The commissioner says they are working to accommodate the surge of migrant families and unaccompanied children. The agency is building a $190 million additional migrant processing center in El Paso that will hold up to 800 people.
This will help us protect the health and safety of families and children in custody while streamlining operations and reducing the time that we're holding families and children.
El Paso Democratic Congresswoman Veronica Escobar says the new facility is long overdue. Escobar sent a letter to CBP offering assistance from local organizations. The processing center is expected to open by April 15th.
For State of Texas in Washington, I'm Anna Wernicke.
We want to take a deeper dive into the big stories of the week, and joining us for perspective is Bob Garrett, Austin Bureau Chief for the Dallas Morning News. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let's first talk about these new numbers from the Border Patrol, and do they help or hurt the case that there is some type of emergency on the border?
Well, they would seem to support the president's case that there's an emergency when you have a bump like that, but people are taking a closer look at them and seeing, Phil, that, you know, this is a whole different kind of immigrant than we used to build our system for, which was people coming from Mexico for economic opportunity. Yeah. These people are, you know, children and mothers and families fleeing Central America, seeking asylum, and it's a whole different thing. And so I'm not sure that this bolsters the president's case for building a wall, because, you know, we need facilities and judges and immigration officers to deal with all this, not necessarily a wall.
Are we seeing a reaction from state lawmakers to any of this? Because they can only do so much. The federal government takes on most of it, but what are we seeing at the state level?
I think what we're seeing mainly so far is a desire to continue to have the state put up nearly $1 billion for state supplementary law enforcement at the border. I don't see the Republican majority seizing on immigration issues this session because they know that that would cause a problem in getting school finance and taxes done with the Democrats.
And let's talk about the school finance plans. We now have two concrete plans, and they're different. There's one in the House, which is more from the School Finance Commission. It's more structural. And then there's one in the Senate, which is just across the board pay raise for teachers. Give me some perspective of how, is it easy for lawmakers to take two different ideas and move them into one idea?
Well, we'll see. They've not been able to fix this for generations, Phil, and they don't have courts forcing them to. But what they do have is Republicans are worried about losing control of the Texas House, which would deny them the ability to control map writing in 2021 redistricting. Let's talk about the Senate. The Senate has yet to put a detailed plan on the table. Dan Patrick really surprised people in January when he came out for a $5,000 across-the-board teacher pay raise. That was not something Greg Abbott, the School Finance Commission, or Speaker Dennis Bonnen in the House had expected or were on board with. So that kind of created the first wrinkle in the kumbaya session. The House has taken a whole different approach of pushing the money and more money than the Senate's budget would give schools. $9 billion in new money is the House plan, and it would let the local school districts decide. And the House people are saying they will do pay raises, but they'll do it the way that fits their district best.
You've been here for a lot of sessions to watch these kind of negotiations come together. Do they work out usually, or are these problems just too big and complicated that things get in the way and they don't do anything again?
Well, the typical pattern is to play a game of chicken and do it all at the last minute when you have to, or you have to come back for a special session in July or August, which is totally miserable. So this thing is so complicated that there's a lot of ways it can fall apart when you push it off to the end of the session. We'll see. The key, I think, to them maybe reach an agreement will be to see if the two chambers pass school finance bills a little earlier and don't wait until mid-May.
And what are the stakes if they don't do anything? I mean, it was a very close election statewide between the Democrats and the Republicans. Don't the Republicans somewhat have to prove that they can govern for everybody and tackle big issues? Are people saying that?
That's certainly what Governor Abbott has been saying since the November election, and I think it would be hard for him to just turn around and say, "Oh, that's okay, we'll try it, in 2021 to get it done." So, I mean, I think it's going to be a big test of whether this Republican leadership in both houses can get their act together.
Bob Garrett, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wants to change how Texans vote in the next election.
It's about the American people saying, we want the people to choose our politicians.
Why the Speaker sees Texas as a prime example of what needs to change.
One of the most powerful people in the country came to Austin to make her case for broad election reforms. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi joined Central Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett to champion the For the People Act. Here's why. Democrats look at Doggett's district as the poster child for partisan gerrymandering in this country, slicing up Travis County, an area full of Democrats but represented by 4 Republican congressmen. The GOP-controlled state legislature drew these lines, but the federal For the People Act would take that power away from them.
They are probably the most partisan debates in the state. Every 10 years after the census, lawmakers redraw who represents whom. The census is next year.
No one should be afraid of objective redistricting. Let the chips fall where they may.
The bill would instead create an independent commission outside of the legislature. The idea works like this. 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 5 independents would approve the legislative district maps. At least one person from each group would have to approve the maps. I asked Speaker Nancy Pelosi if she just doesn't trust state lawmakers to draw the lines.
No, it's not trust. It's about the American people saying, we want the people to choose our politicians. We don't want our politicians to choose the people that will vote for them.
Republicans disagree. They point to nearly a decade of court decisions leaving most of the maps intact. Then there's how Democrats picked up 12 state seats and 2 congressional seats last fall.
12 seats flipped 3 months ago. So I would say that's pretty bipartisan areas.
Speaker of the Texas House, Dennis Bonnen, has said the redistricting process will begin after this legislative session.
We want maps to be drawn fairly and without discrimination, and that's the way it should be done.
Other key aspects of the For the People Act include creating a national voter registration program, making Election Day a national holiday, allowing candidates to voluntarily finance their campaigns with tax dollars, and requiring super PACs, dark money groups, to disclose their donors. Despite support in the House, this bill is not expected to pass the United States Senate nor be signed by the President. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Praise, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.